Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, are you in for a treat today as I have another special guest on our show, as I'm getting to talk to Devontae Cole today. He goes by DC. He's a human resource business partner. He works for Enlink Midstream, and DC, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm good, Bruce. How you doing? I appreciate you having me.
It's funny. We were talking offline, and we have been trying to connect at Dallas HR meetings. And it seems like when I'm there, you're not there. When you're there, I'm not there. And man, I wanted to get you on the show so we could actually connect.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, this is going to be a lot of fun. I always like to start the show having our guests share a brief highlight of their organization. And for you, you work at Enlink. I would just, for those who don't know Enlink, could you share a brief highlight of who Enlink is and how you serve your customers?
Yeah, so Enlink Midstream is a oil and gas energy-based company. We're located in downtown Dallas, headquartered there. We also have a headquarters in Houston. We actually process crude oil, natural liquids, gas, and also natural gases through transportation, also processing and storing those gases as well. We're actually tapping into a new project here called CO2 carbon capture. So that's going to be a big thing coming for us. We're going to be doing a lot of that in North Texas, also in the Louisiana pipelines as well.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. It's great to learn about all the different companies that just high performers are working for and the amazing things they're doing. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm really excited about getting to know you, Devontae. I like to start the show really with you just sharing your story. Like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get in HR? And I want to just throw this out there too. You're also a veteran of the U.S. Navy, and my grandfather was in the U.S. Navy.
All
Served in World War II, so I'm really excited about this conversation. But share a little bit about your where'd you grow up and how in the world did you get in HR?
Yeah, so not originally a Texan. I'm actually from Louisiana,
Okay.
New Orleans originally. Moved to Dallas in 2018. Prior to that, I was in the Navy. I was in the Navy from 2012 to 2017. I was stationed in Augusta, Georgia, and then also San Diego, California. I was on a LHD called USS Macon Island from 2015 to 2017, where I actually deployed out of San Diego. I was out from October 2016 to May 2017. I was basically doing HR in the Navy, and folks always do a little eyebrow raise on that. They're like, "What?" And I say, "Yeah, it was pretty much HR, right now, more administrative, of course, but I did performance management. We did awards and recognition. We helped for pay discrepancies and things like that. You could also tap into the legal side of things, depending on where you may have been stationed. So yeah, it was an experience for sure, and it kind of helped me identify what is it I want to do. One of the points I may mention later is networking. Networking in the Navy, I talked to a lot of folks who may have had spouses who were doing HR outside of the Navy and in their civilian life. So that kind of got me researching, and I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. Got enrolled into school, went to UNT Dallas, graduated 2021 actually, and I got a bachelor's in HR. And I started my first HR job at Honeywell. That was in 2021. Then I segued it over to Enlink, where I'm at today. I've been here 5 months, and now I'm an HR business partner, loving this dynamic, loving this setup, and this side of the business actually. Yeah.
I love it. You mentioned HR in the Navy. I'm curious. So there's a lot of things. I mean, you just said you dealt with performance management and administration and some legal. And by the way, my stepbrother lives in San Diego. I love San Diego weather.
It's
But
great.
now that you've kind of transitioned into the civilian workforce in the corporate setting, do you find a pretty good comparison for HR in the Navy as well as in the corporate? Talk about that.
So, it's interesting. There is a big comparison, I feel, but then I feel like there's also this big difference. And I would just say, just kind of how you handle employee relations and the involvement that you have in the Navy. So, my involvement in the Navy with employee relations is not as involved as it is in the corporate setting. Just
Mm,
as I can't really advise managers or
mm,
leadership on how to handle exact cases and things like that. There's a whole separate team and legal team for that, right? So now, depending on where I'm stationed, I may be a part of that legal team in my job that I'm in. So, for example, if I was an HR business partner working primarily, on helping TA with some things, then, I go to this next company, I may be primarily helping with ER. It's a difference depending on where you're stationed. But another thing I would call out is instructions and policies and
mm.
updates like that. So now, we take guidance from DOL, for example, and create policies that work for the company. In the Navy, it's the same thing. I take what we call Big Navy, we take their policies and we incorporate them to fit the ship or fit that duty station. Same thing in a similar way, but also there are some differences, right? So yeah.
Very interesting. We talked about Dallas HR, and we're going to get into volunteering and networking and all of that. But I was thinking about Dallas HR actually used to have our outreach group used to help a group called Allies in Service.
Okay.
And the what we would do is we would review resumes for, well, people that had come from the military and trying to transition into civilian workforce. And I just thought it's interesting. I would love to ask you that question just since we're talking about this. How hard was it to transition for you? Because it sounds like to me, it might not have been that hard because you kind of knew what you wanted to do and you went to school and got your degree and talk about that.
So you hit it right on the head. So the biggest thing is having a plan. Folks who tend to not succeed when getting out, they most likely didn't have a
Mm,
plan or they didn't have a clue what they wanted to do, which is fine, right? But my advice and kind of something I stuck with myself was I would not get out without having a plan. Again, that success rate, right? My success rate would be a lot higher if I have that plan, which I got enrolled in school before I actually got out of the Navy. I made sure everything was already set in stone before I got out. Now, there are the culture differences, and that's probably the one where I struggled the most when
mm,
transitioning to civilian life is just the culture. When you're in the military, you're taken care of.
mm.
You don't really have to think, you don't have to do almost anything, and you just do what you're told if that's how you operate. Well, I can do what I'm told, but I'm somebody who takes initiative and wants to make things happen and do it my way and figure out the way to make it happen in my terms, right? That was probably the hardest, and the way people talk and little things like that, the way you're trained, the way, you have to wake up at certain times. It was more so a mindset shift that I feel like I kind of struggle with more so than the actual transition into the workforce, if that makes sense.
What was that breakthrough?
I would say it was probably my first summer. So this would have been 2018.
Okay.
I wasn't getting luck with jobs. And I
Mm,
actually reached a point. I'm not somebody that really feels down or gets depressed or anything like that. But that was the first moment I think I was like, oh, this is kind of tough. I was not getting the hits I wanted with jobs. But instead of just letting myself get down, I had a professor that actually was like, you got to keep pushing, tap into the resources at the university. So worked with them to get my resume revamped and just took any initiative I could to take that step back and say, hey, I can't blame these companies for not hiring me, right? Did I present myself in a way that I needed to present myself? Did I showcase what I have to offer and deliver? So I took that step back and I ended up getting a job later that year in September, starting at an immigration law firm called Barry Appleman in Leiden. And I got my foot in the door, still proceeded with school, and I was just very determined after that. And some folks there will tell you I was very adamant about school and making sure I got my degree, but I also wanted to work because that's just the type of person I am.
Do you see? I have chills right now. If you are listening, you need to get out your pen, get out your journal. You need to be taking some notes here. I wrote down have a plan, right? Have a plan. That's for every area of your life. I love that. But I love how you talked about your professor that said, keep pushing. And I always like to talk about mentors on the show. For you, were there some, I don't know, you talked about your professor. Were there maybe a couple of others that have helped you get to where you need to go? Maybe it was in the military. Maybe it's been after you've kind of transitioned. Talk a little bit about that. And more importantly, what was it that made them a good mentor?
I'll tell you, Bruce, I like to say I think I learned a lot more by seeing folks in leadership positions and me seeing what I did not want to be or what I did not want to do.
Mm,
And I harp on that because I think a lot of folks are so ready to talk about, this person was my mentor and,
mm,
all the great things they taught me. But I actually, when I look back, I learned a lot from folks that were in those positions that maybe I wanted to be in, or I kind of looked up to them, but they did a lot of things I didn't agree
mm,
with. But I learned that when I get to that, I want to be the opposite, right? So that kind of is what I feel like molded me. But as far as good mentors and the good things that I received, I would say I had a couple in the Navy. I've had some professors. I've also had folks that I did not directly report to within different companies. So they're at all different levels of leadership. I don't feel like, sitting in a VP chair that you're the leader, that someone that's an HR business partner is not a leader. So if I had peers, same level at me, I learned from them as well. It's kind of one of those things. Like I say, I would really harp on. I learned more from those that did what I felt like they shouldn't be doing
mm.
or I did not want to do when I get to that seat.
I'm gonna circle back on this because I want to talk about networking a little bit later, and I'm gonna jump back on that learning not what to do. I got to tell you, I've served under some great leaders, but I've also served under some leaders that it wasn't that they weren't great. They just operated differently and the way I didn't want to operate. But I learned so much. Like I look back today, I always like to say I'm mid-career. My wife says, hey, keep telling yourself you're more than mid-career. But when I look back on that, and you're a young professional. I always like to ask this question, DC, around just really about purpose. And wrote the book Find Your Lane, and that's really about finding your calling, finding what works for you. I'm curious now that you have transitioned, you're starting to see some success. You're a very ambitious person. Have you felt like you found your lane? And if you did, was there that one moment that said, "Man, I love HR. I'm accelerating."
I think it was the very first job. So working at Honeywell, I learned a lot. Anyone out there that's worked at Honeywell is currently working at Honeywell. Honeywell is a different beast, but you're going to learn. You are going to learn, and you are going to be exposed to many different things. I think being at that first site and working with the employees, working with the managers, getting to know the business, I feel this tingle in a sense. So that still holds true today. And one of my lines is, I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a police officer, a firefighter, but I wanted to help people.
Ooh.
And I feel like I get that by being in HR. Whether that's through coaching, whether that's through, talking through a manager and, guiding them on performance with someone and, or even just looking at compensation review. I feel like I am helping the employees, but also helping the business, right? So that I get my fulfillment, I would say, right? I get that fulfillment in that regard.
Isn't that cool? I gotta tell you, when I graduated from college and I joined a moving company, my brother worked for the moving company, and I remember the whole time I was thinking, "Man, did I waste my whole college career on moving boxes?" And what I realized is I had the wrong mindset, because, about probably 7 years into it, I helped a guy, a banker. He had called me and asked me to help his mom. She lived in assisted living. She needed to move from Dallas to Houston, and she had, like, a couple of boxes, it was nothing, right?
Yeah.
And, but the stress on him was incredible. And for me to take that away from him and help him, all of a sudden it just like I had an epiphany that I was helping people like no other. Like when you're
Yep.
moving, that's a stressful time. And so I was like, I'm in my lane. And when you just said that, you said, not a doctor, not a lawyer, not a firefighter, but you want to help people. And when you got in that position where you can help people, it's like, man, it's amazing when you find your lane, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it feels good. I was thinking about this earlier today. I said you hear all the time, "Oh, if you love what you do, you won't ever feel like you're working," right? I don't know if I agree with that. I work, but I really enjoy what I do. And I think that's what keeps me going back each day. There's something to be done, right? I have work to do for my employees, for my business, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I use that term a lot, and I think for me, I couldn't really be convicted about that term until I started building on to that. Right, I started volunteering. I started serving in different areas. I started doing these different things, and then all of a sudden, the full career came to full circle. And I was like, "Oh man, I love what I do. Like, just do." And that's not necessarily, trucks and boxes. It's just about serving, right?
Yeah,
At the end of
yeah.
the day. I love that. Man, this is so cool. I always like to ask my guests, that is life and leadership lane. I always like to ask my guests, if somebody said, "Hey, DC," if somebody said, "Hey, what's leadership to you?" How would you respond to that?
I think leadership is being a guide, being that sounding board in a sense as well.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is being able to listen to what others are saying, what they're doing, and then being able to guide them, right? And by guiding them, though, doesn't mean they have to do exactly what you may be giving them advice on or saying. It just means that you've given them that courage or that next sense of hope to get
mm,
to get through whatever it is they may be going through. Again, I made a comment earlier. I don't think it's position based at all title based. I think it's literally just an individual characteristic that someone could have.
mm. Hope. That's a big
Yeah,
word, man.
you give them hope.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I I was just on a podcast, being interviewed the other day, and they asked me, what's the best thing that's ever happened to you in your career? And I told them when someone come up and told me I gave them hope. I mean, it's just such a powerful word or concept, or just knowing that, hey, there's somebody here in my corner that can help me get to where I want to go, whether it's through a conversation or a, promotion or whatever that is, right? Hope's big, isn't it?
And that ties back to me with the fulfillment that I get, right?
Mm,
And being in HR, like I said, it could be giving someone that promotion. I follow up with managers all the time. How did that conversation go? When you delivered that letter and talked to them, and it went great. They're very appreciative. And I thank you. I like to hear that. It's good, right? It's not always the bad things. I don't want to just know how did that performance conversation go because
mm,
they've been late to work. No, I want to
mm.
know about the good things as well. How did that conversation go? So
Talk a little bit about HR business partner for those who don't know. What do you actually do?
the way I like to describe it is, and in my current role, I describe us as a one-stop shop.
Okay.
And I say that because we're literally the go-to individuals for anything HR related. So we may partner with our benefits team.
Mhm,
We're going to partner with the compensation, but I'm the person that you're going to come through and I'm going to strategize and work through to figure out what the best outcome is. Now, that's also not just for the employee, right? But it's for the business as well. So, the HR business partner is that what I would say bridge. You're that
mm,
bridge with HR and the business, and you're not just doing the day to day tacticalness, you're doing the strategic piece as well with any and every decision that you're involved in or that you're being tasked with.
let me ask you this, and I'm just sitting here thinking, here. I mean, you're a pretty solid guy. I mean, it's I can tell that you built a lot of trust. I want to ask you this question because there's probably some people that are listening right now saying, "Man, I really like that, but I haven't really been able to build trust within the organization because I would think that what you do, people would really need to have trust in you and what you're sharing. Talk a little bit about how you've been able to build trust in the organization and I don't know, maybe to help somebody else that's listening.
Be you. I'll start with
Mm,
that. Be you.
mm,
If you have good intent, folks can pick up on that, right?
mm,
Right now I'm really in this phase of learning the business. I'm new to the industry, right? I'm new to the company. I'm learning people, I'm learning the business. But one thing that sticks is HR.
mhm,
I've been doing it enough to know HR and know what needs to be done. But now you have to take care of the people. When folks see that you're taking care of them, you start to build that trust. I got your
mm,
back just as much as you have my back, right?
mm.
It's not just me taking, and say the same to the employees. If I talk to a manager about something, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell the employee the exact same thing because it applies both ways in most occasions, right? So it's that, right? And it's how I operate, and it's just I don't know. It's a gift, I guess. It's just how I am. It's my nature.
I mean, I hear you talking about transparency
Yeah.
and taking things head on and just having be not afraid to ask questions. I love all of that. And you probably have done a lot of networking internally as well within the company. I would think that, you try to get to know some people along the way, right?
Yep. I have this philosophy. I see someone new, I don't recognize the face. Hey, who are you? I'm Devontae. Because
Oh,
it's a very close environment, so most folks know everybody, right? I'm new. I'm still the new guy. 5 months in, I'm still a new guy, new HR guy. But I want to get to know you. I want to put a face to the name.
I love that. You're using the former president, George H.W. Bush. When George W. Bush wrote about his father, he shared a story, and basically the story was his father. If anybody was he called it the 10-foot rule. If anybody was in 10 foot of him and he didn't know who they are, he would walk over there and introduce himself and ask them who they are. So here, DC's using the 10-foot rule. I love that.
I'm at the night
Is
write
that
that one down. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this: is that hard to do though?
It is. I would consider myself somebody that's a extrovert and
Mm,
very personable and outgoing, but
yeah.
it's also a little outside
Yeah.
of my comfort zone as well, right? So, yeah, sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Well, I want people to hear that because there's probably people that are listening. They're like, you know what, I'd like to do that, but that's hard to do. But what's interesting is that if you'll just face it and you'll just go do it, the other person will like appreciate it so much. And all of a sudden you have a connection. So you look at the plus side on the other side, right?
Environments, culture, I think play a big part. So you can have a culture within. I can take Dallas HR networking events, for example.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk
You're
about that.
you're there and folks are ready to talk to you. You
Hmm.
know, people are ready to understand you, learn about you, tell you about them. And I feel like that's how it should be with networking. Sometimes you can go to certain events, things can be very siloed. Folks already have, their groups or their people that they talk to only, but you're there and people want to talk to you. They want to get to know you. They want to learn about you. They want, if you're looking for a job too, right? I mean, they're trying to see if they know someone and things like that. So it's really a true networking environment to me. I really enjoy those events.
Yeah, and you may have a culture inside the company that it's not a true networking environment, so it's gonna make it twice as hard. You're gonna have to work twice as hard to do it, and then you have other companies where, you read about them, right? The Southwest Airlines of the world where everybody knows everybody, and so just I love what you said that because you said the environment is very, very key. Let's talk a little bit about networking. You mentioned Dallas HR. It seems like it's easier. Everybody's real eager, but I got to tell you, and I want you to go back to your first time because the first time I went to a Dallas HR event, I wrote about it in my book, Find Your Lane. And I remember how daunting it was. It looked like everybody knew everybody. And I was like, how do you even get to know people? How do
Yeah.
you step up into the conversation? And what I found out, years later is there weren't really a whole lot of people that knew a whole lot of people. It just looked that way. Talk
Yep.
about your first experience and how you've been able to navigate.
I would say mine was actually kind of overwhelming. You depending on what time you get there, you may
Yeah,
walk into a
right.
bunch of people already heavily engaged in conversation, right? But to your point, I think the very first encounter I had, I just walked in and saw someone standing there, and I just started talking.
Mm,
And they knew someone, and then we started talking, and then somebody else started talking. And then you just start walking around, and it just starts to happen naturally, right? And then you go to a few events, you start seeing familiar faces, and then again, same thing. They know someone that knows someone, and that knows someone, and that conversation just grows. The network grows. But again, to the original point, it can be overwhelming. But you just once you take that first step a little
mhm.
bit, it tends to work out.
Hey, let me ask you this. Why did you decide to go to a networking event? I mean, you've got a job, you've got probably got a lot going on. Why'd you decide to kind of get out and start networking and meeting other people?
So I'll tell you, I was actually wrapping up, I think, my senior year in college, and it was that reality facing moment, right? Was like, all right, I'm ready to start tapping into HR, but I don't really know anybody. I know folks from school that are getting a degree like me, but other than that, I don't really know anybody. So um, Dallas HR actually came to my university,
Hmm.
and they presented themselves, and we had some leaders that spoke, that had positions there. And I remember just writing things down, connecting with folks on LinkedIn, and doing a little more research. And I was like, all right, I think I'm going to get involved in this. It seems like a really good opportunity to meet folks. And I was like, and why wouldn't you join a local HR organization? So that was kind of the real opening for me, and kind of invitation. And again, reality started to sink in, and I was like, all right, I
Mm.
got to do something, because all 4 years you hear network, network, network. I actually went to my university about a month ago and spoke to some individuals, and that was one of my things. I said, you're going to hear network, 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 but it's true. You do need to network. And to your point earlier, I'm networking at work as well, right? It's not
Mhm.
just out in the community. It's also at the job. So
Yeah, it's not just externally, it's internally for sure. But I got to tell you, so okay, did you say you went back to the school and talked to the students?
I
That's
did.
fantastic. That's
It
fantastic.
was
I have a acronym I saw a long time ago. I wish I could give the person credit for it. I don't know where I saw it, but it's called ACT. Action changes things.
okay.
And so yeah, they came and they talked, right? Hey, that all sounds good. I think that happens a lot. The key is you took action.
Yeah.
You took action, and that's what I want people to hear is that, whatever that is, you have to go, you have to take action, and it will really change things for you, won't it?
When they're in those situations, right, they're going to speak to those universities, they're going to speak to those students. When you're in that situation, I think you just need to touch one person, right? You're not going to touch everybody in the room. Everybody in that room did not go sign up to be involved in Dallas HR, but clearly you had at least one person that did do it, right? So it kind of goes to, why are you even doing it in the first place, right? What's the purpose? To touch at least one person in that room.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, DC, what drives you?
I always say to be successful, and I get folks that say, well, what does that mean for you?
That's a good question.
To me, it means that I know there's more,
Mm,
and I'm continuing to go after it. And it's something that I want to do. And what I mean by that is, I think, a lot of folks get caught up in this. They feel like they need to go do this, or they feel like they have to go do this,
mm,
versus I like to do things that I actually want to do. And if I can be successful doing it, why not? Success comes in many different forms for me. So that's why I keep it very, very whole, and don't really get into direct examples. But that's what would be, yeah, success.
I wrote down, why not? Why not? I love that. When you said that about there's something more out there, it reminded me, I quote a lot of Jim Rohn, and he says, if you want more, you just have to become more. Now, more can mean so many different things, right? It could mean I want to be a better friend, a better husband, a better son. If you want more, you have to become more. You have to keep working on that, and you have to keep investing in that. And so when you said that, it immediately, like, I just went there. I was like, man, I'm telling you right now, DC just continues to invest because he wants to become more. And I love that. That's fantastic.
And nobody's gonna do it for you. So you got to do it
Mm.
yourself. You got to take a hold of it and do it
Uh,
yourself.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Hey, let me ask you this. I always talk about personal development. I think that's so important. We just talked about wanting more, becoming more. For those that are listening, and I don't know, maybe they are college students, maybe the people in their mid-career that says, "Hey, you know what? It's time for me to do something." Well, what are a couple of things that you feel like you do or you have done that have helped you get to where you are today? I'm curious. Like, do you have any like personal development strategies? Do you, read? Do you have a system? Talk about that.
I think it's really my mind. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is
okay.
once I put my mind to something, I go for it and I like don't stop until I get it. That's hard for a lot of people because you're going to run through trial and error. You're going to run through some things that may be a roadblock, right? But if I want it, the only roadblock is going to be me. So going back to segueing into HR on the civilian side, I had a plan. It was get my degree. So there's no question, right? I had the experience. Now let's get that degree check. While I was doing my degree, working, I did an internship.
Mm,
I wanted no question to say, this guy has not done what he needed to do to get this experience, to get this opportunity, right? The only thing that's going to stop me from getting that job would have been me at that
mm,
point. And so I got the job, kind of want to say first interview, right?
mm.
But not, and that's not a bragging thing, but I was very determined. I had my plan. Maybe my plan got revamped along the way, but my ultimate goal was still the same. So you just keep going. But a plan, I would say, I'm heavy on a plan. You got to have a plan.
Love that.
Figure out what it is you need to do to make that plan be successful, and you don't stop going after it if that's what you really want.
That's fantastic. I want to ask one more question before I pivot here. I want to go back to the military. I'm curious, and what you just said may be the answer, but I'm curious. What's one thing or a couple that you have taken from serving our military into the corporate office today? What I don't know, what's something that you feel like helped you and you brought that with you?
That hard work will be rewarded.
Mm,
In boot camp, you know, it's a different for those that serve. Boot camp is totally different than the actual, you know, military life. Right after that, when you tap in, we call it like we used to say the real Navy. When you tap into the real Navy, I personally didn't do so well in boot camp. Boot camp was very rough for me from a personality mindset. My mindset wasn't there yet. As I segued into going to school to learn my job for the Navy, I was very determined. I was very focused. I knew what I wanted and where I wanted to go. And so leaving school, I was promoted very early. So I went from the lowest rank, which is E1. I went from E1 to being promoted to E4 when I got to my first duty station. That's not that common at all.
mhm,
After that, you go pretty much up the rank. So E5, E6. I then performed greatly at my job and I got a outstanding performance evaluation, which allowed me to take the test to be able to be promoted early.
mm,
I took that test and I scored very high because I studied for that exam and then I was promoted. Same thing on the civilian side too, right? I mean, you do well and you're in the right organization, you will be rewarded, you will be promoted, you will get those opportunities that you want. Another thing is I'm very vocal. And when I mentioned I was working at the immigration law firm, everyone knew I was in school for HR. They knew HR was going to be my goal, my dream job, and I was just doing what I needed to do there. I went from being an admin assistant to being a paralegal. That wasn't the path I wanted, but I was doing what I needed to do at that job while pursuing my degree. Same thing. I segued it into, like I said, I got the internship, got my degree, started pursuing that job, started applying like crazy, got the opportunity. The hard work pays off.
I love all of that. When I heard you say that, I also thought about, well, I thought about two things. Number one, mindset. You just have to decide, right? You have to get your mind right. For me, I'm sitting here going back to, hey, when I finally decided I'm going to be this, then that's when things change. But I also heard failure in there. And but you failed forward. You said, hey, you know what? I didn't do as well here. And then, I had to get my mind right. And I want people to hear that, because there's a lot of people that maybe have gone through or are going through failure right now. What you're saying is, hey, you can fall down, but you got to get back up and get your
Exactly.
mind right.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. This is so good. Oh, DC, I'm telling you right now, I cannot wait till we meet up again. This is going to be, we're going to continue this conversation. This is so good. I know that there are people taking notes like crazy right now. Hey, I do want to ask you this last question before we pivot to it's time to accelerate. I always like to ask, and you've given some great advice today, but were you given some advice? I don't know. Maybe it was growing up, or maybe it was in the military, or maybe it's recently. It's just so good. You just find yourself sharing with others.
A lot of the advice came from observations, and I would use my pops for example. He would mention things like, you got to get a job that's stable and things like that. He wasn't a college grad, so he didn't really understand the importance of going through that, but he understood why I was doing it and things like that. So I think watching him work as hard as he did, it carried over to me. So for example, that's why I say it's more of an observation that I
Mm.
got from folks. So that would be my advice that I took, was like, you work hard, you do what you got to do, and things will happen.
We are cut from the same cloth, man. I've shared this before. My father, he didn't finish school. He's a bowling proprietor, right? He was in the bowling business, and so of course our family's got a passion for the sport of bowling. But he worked hard. He still works hard. He's I don't know, he's 81 now, and he continues to get up at early in the morning and go up and do his thing. And I watched that. I watched that work ethic, and I was like, okay, that's what that looks like. And so when you talk about that, that resonates with me, and I know it resonates with listeners, is people are watching us, right? Whether it's in our family or a networking event, going to a networking event, we've seen people who network really well, and we've seen people that don't network really
Yep.
well, and you can learn a lot from both. And so everything you've shared has been absolutely terrific. I love all of this. It's been so much fun. Hey, I want to shift to it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you a few fun questions. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast or an audible?
I would rather listen to a podcast.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You're a busy guy. You're like, hey, give me the headphones. Let's do it. Hey, I always talk about great leaders. They're grateful leaders. What are you grateful for?
I would say is having the ability to connect with others and reach others to where they actually view me as a leader. I'm not one to, and I never have been. I've been in multiple leadership positions since I was in high school. I was a drum major in band, right? And that was tough because you're dealing with peers and folks your age, but just how I carry myself, and you say folks are always watching. I'm glad I have the ability to get folks to understand that
That's
I just want the best for them just as much as myself. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm grateful for you being on the show today, and I'm grateful for your service in our military. Hey, outside of work, what do you like to do? What energizes you?
I'm a music guy, so I
Mm,
love anything involving music. I would also say I try to be active a little bit. I played kickball for a while. I was on a team locally, and I really enjoy that. That's about it. And I just
mm,
try to get out and clear my head, go on some runs, some walks.
mm.
That's about it.
I love that, man. Mindset,
Yeah.
mindset. I've learned a lot from you today. Hey, here's my final question, and I'm excited about your answer here. I'd love to ask this question. DC, 10 years older. is around the corner knocking at your door, and you are going to go answer that door, what's he going to tell you?
You did good.
Mm,
You did good.
I love that. That's fantastic. Man, this has been so much fun. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show, sharing your perspective, your wisdom, what you've learned, especially transitioning. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy hearing that story. Hey, if somebody heard something that you shared and they want to connect with you, or they want to start networking, build their network, and they want you to be part of that, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I'm very heavily on LinkedIn.
Okay.
They can shoot me a message or anything like that, and I'll gladly respond.
Absolutely. And I always like to say, if you heard Devontae on Life and Leadership, let him know that you heard him on the podcast. Maybe share something that he shared that impacted you, and that makes that connection like instant. You're like, hey, oh, I need to talk to this person. So, hey, I appreciate you. I can't wait to continue the conversation. I can't wait to share this conversation. So, thanks for coming on the show, and I appreciate your friendship.
I appreciate you, Bruce. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely. I can't wait to share it. I'll talk to you later, man.